Why do the majority of traders quit? It's not because they have blown up trading accounts or run out of money or sold their last possession. Traders give up because they have lost belief in their ability to be confident in themselves, belief in their approach, framework, and system, belief that one can make consistent P&L from the market. Just over 3 weeks ago, I had this trader come into my office. He sits on our first trading floor here in Cyprus to say he's going to quit as he feels he'll never be good at this game and that he never knows how to protect his good days because the next day, straight after a good day, he can give good earnings all back and even more. I'm not quite sure if this sounds familiar to you. His face, as he walked into the room was red, his energy was depleted, and I felt that energy spear multiple times when traders come into my office, filled with that toxicity of, and he was also angry, and resentment, the ego, the monkey mind starts, on your shoulder and digs deep into, the inner confines of your unconscious and conscious state. Because he had sacrificed the last year leaving home country. He came from this city, took a flight over to Cyprus to pursue his dream as a trader. Now, it doesn't matter how beautiful the turquoise waters are or how many days of sunshine, if you're not making P&L, if you're grinding, it doesn't matter what the outside looks like because the internal mind doesn't look like turquoise waters. He then went on to a live training account in March 2024, so just a couple of months ago. And he actually started well. As a junior, he started well. We expect our junior traders, in the first 6 months to go down on account. And we have to prepare them mentally for that. And he started well, but all of a sudden the losses accumulated. And as the losses accumulated, the frustration grew. I could sense the space he was in, as I've been involved in traders' careers now for almost 2 decades. And what he needed now was a meta picture perspective shift. Sometimes I have to take them, from that position of the wood out of the trees, give that 30,000 foot approach. And that's sometimes you have to draw yourself out the ladder, draw yourself out the chart to give yourself a meta philosophical understanding and a learning approach of where you're at in your game. If you don't create that distance, and that's why weekend practice, when you detach when the markets are closed that week, unless you're trading cryptos, is a powerful point to iterate and develop your game for the following week, when you have that distance from the market. So, before I said anything to him, I drew this table on a rough piece of paper. Okay, so the table I drew. No, don't worry. It looks like hieroglyphics. I'll break it down for you in a moment. But we started in a very neat little pattern, and then we expanded upon it. And this table you can use to develop your very own game. Okay, I'm gonna show you a framework snippet. Now we have multiple models, multiple frameworks that we go through in the 6-week career program. Segmenting all the different skill sets to become that holistic futures day trader. But before you judge your training career, I told him, before you judge your training career and your P&L, I want you first to judge this. This is the question I asked him. I want you to judge your framework, your systems, your practices that determine your strategies and your modus operandi. And I asked him the following question. Please rank your edge skill level in each of these 4 areas that we train you in on our 6-week program. Okay, so I asked him to rank. And so let's redraw the table, that messy table I showed you on the little photo I took of my desk, so it makes sense to you. And so I asked him, please rank your edge skill level in each of these 4 areas, this area here, news, geopolitical trading, flow data trading, central bank speakers, technical. All of these grounded in the 3 main tools that we train our traders on our 6-week program, and the footprint, the volume profile, the price ladder, the DOM being our tool of access, of execution. All of these are grounded in those foundational tools. But each one of them, now, these areas of edge overlap. We're just creating a very mutually exclusive edge identity. And I asked him to rank each of these skill sets. So flow data, trading US tier 1 data, trading European data, trading European PMIs ahead of the Bonopics, bond auctions, US Treasury auctions, central banks, the Fed, ECB, FOMC, BOE, technical trades, volume structures, profile structures, news geopolitical, when a theme, COVID crisis, global financial crisis, Russia, Ukraine, Trump winning the elections. What is he going to do to Mexico and China? And so I asked him to rank each of these skill sets. And so what we do is when we rank, we also start defining. We have certain models and measures that we train our students during the 6-week career program of how you define a certain environment. So then we ask the trader, well, what environment in Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4? Now listen, it can change within a week, but what's the predominant edge in that environment? And if it's February or March of 2020, February or March of 21, when Ukraine is being attacked by Russia, during those 2 months, the first quarter of 2020, when it was COVID, and 2021, those are predominantly news-centric geopolitical environments that instigate certain type of scalping tactics. So what are that period is dominated by that type of environment. Q2, Q3, and then he starts measuring. We have report cards of how they measure themselves. Well, then what is the skill process system that you need to have in place to develop this edge? What is the skill process that you need to have in place to develop this edge? What are the frameworks, the systems? And then something that we do uniquely at Axia Futures is we identify for the team, for our traders on our program, who are the top traders in each of these skill sets and what are their practices and frameworks. So you can benchmark your best practice according to their best practice. You just iterate on a best practice instead of starting from ground zero. Starting from ground zero is going to take you a long time to improve in a particular skill set. So anyway, that's just a quick summary. So I asked him to rank his skill level in each of these 4 categories. And this is what he did. So in news geopolitical, he ranked that as a 7. In flow data, okay, trading the auction, trading data, US CPI, PPI that happened yesterday and the day before, central bank meetings and speakers, a 6, and technicals, he ranked as a 1. He loves, he's a massive contributor towards the team on trading certain fundamental plays. And so he has a very good practice of how he organizes his Twitter space, his news space, of how he reconciles, how he debriefs the news, how he preps for the geopolitical events, how he creates certain followers on Twitter. So he has a certain practice over here. And he has strong relationships with certain traders on the desk. Then I asked that $1,000 you lost today, the $1,000 that he came into my room, stormed into my room here, all angry, saying, Alex, I'm never going to make it. And I asked that $1,000 you lost today, what category in the edge core 4 would that fall into? His answer, with a very soft and almost guilty voice, it would fall into the technical. Okay, it was a NASDAQ trade. It was a technical trade that all of a sudden he saw the NASDAQ selling off. He was frustrated because he never made money the last 3 days. So he was lured in, suggested, the market is like a siren. Those ladders can seduce you, right? If you haven't traded a while, you're looking for an opportunity, but there's no edge. And all of a sudden you just through boredom, you get serenaded by the price ladder and you start executing. And before he knew it, in a very short period of time, he lost $1,000. And so it fell into this area. And so then I said, you exposed your max risk for the day, because his current risk is $1,000 a day. You exposed your max risk for the day in an area you are absolutely the weakest, that you don't have a very strong process of debrief. You don't have a prep framework. You don't have any strong learning relationships with the top technical traders in our team. And so the question I ask in each of these areas, if the market is in a high news geopolitical area, you're going to deploy 90% of your risk if your edge skill is in this area. Okay, if the market environment is purely technically driven, if there's no news generating market moves, just technical moves happening in gold, happening in S&P, happening in crude oil, if the market for that period is dominated by just technical moves, it's still in central banks, like in 2013, 2006, zero rates environment, central banks weren't a theme like they have been post 2020, post 2019. Flow data events, they come and go. News geopolitical, they have their little feature for 2-3 months of the year, and then they had their peak theme. And so in an environment where it was predominantly technical, he had a 1 ranking. And so does that make sense as a professional? Asking like, does that make sense? And now you're judging your entire training career in an area you do the least amount of practice and work or implementation of frameworks and systems. So he comes into my office, dropped $1,000 on a swing trade. He saw this level. He just made up this level. All of a sudden, he drew a line on the chart. He's frustrated. and didn't prep for this trade beforehand. His scalping skills are still developing. He doesn't have a strong profile, a price ladder replay practice, but he got by on trading the few fundamental themes in an area you don't. And so, I say you're judging your career in an area you don't have a solid process or system in place to improve the skill set. Then I asked him, this area where you grade yourself for the most edge, how have you done on the days that have offered macro opportunity? I said, let's get some evidence and look at your equity curve. And this is what we discovered. So this is that NASDAQ trade over here. Now, during this time, and this is going back to when he first started live up until May the 7th, okay? And this area was a fairly themeless environment, low VIX, and a more predominantly tech environment, okay? And he wasn't performing. He started okay in the market. So his first day live went up, and then he started giving money back. Okay, and I remember he was a bit distraught over here, but where he wanted to effectively quit was over here on this technical QI trade. Even though, he was still, marginally up. The very next day, there was an Iranian de-escalation trade. And this trade actually did a workshop for the Jigsaw community just over, I think a couple of weeks ago. And this is where he made money. And then he had his best day ever over non-farm payrolls. And so when there are correlations in play, his scalping skills are very effective over correlated plays, over tier one US data or geopolitical events. And so if he wants to trade, if those events aren't happening too often and he wants to trade more often, he has to develop more skill sets in those three other areas of edge that we train our traders. So from him giving a meta perspective and understanding, this all of a sudden started game changing how he approached the week and skill areas that he needed to improve upon. And so the proof was there, and he knew now where to improve his game. If I just go back, if you can start segmenting your game, you change the very practices and process of the areas you need to improve upon and where to seek the learning and the help and the development. Okay, and so we give our traders this big mosquito, this big meta perspective of how to approach the markets. And so the proof was there, and he knew where now to improve his game. And after that meeting that we had on the coaching session, that was his response the next day. He lost money, but he was fine with this. He wasn't fine with this loss. He was fine with this loss because he knew where to amplify his game. And this is what happened. It's what happened subsequently. Now, his career is still early on. He's going to face many challenges. I'm going to have many more stories about this trader. But he has skill set in certain areas, but we have to upskill him in all the other areas to be a fully rounded trader so he can harvest money out of the market in all seasons. And that is the art of trading, is breaking down the game into its various components, then understanding what skill area needs, what practices and processes to master that area. And this is why on our 6-week career training program, we are always focusing on those rapidly building skills and practice in these 4 core areas. And it's why we keep on pushing out new 7-figure traders year after year, and the occasional gem, that occasional 8-figure trader that comes.